You're listening to KPFK, 90.7 FM in Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara, and live around the world at kpfk.org.
I mean, not just the American government. Governments in general lie.
Ay Dios, ¿qué es lo que le pasa al jefe en comando? Señor, ¿será que su cerebro no está funcionando? ¿Será que no quiere pensar en lo que pudiera pasar?
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Welcome to another edition of the Signal News, Information, and Analysis. I'm your host, Armando, Dino, Gudiño, and happy Saturday, happy weekend to all who are joining us on the web at kpfk.org as we get started with our Fall Fund Drive. Make sure you check us out, kpfk.org, and you can also call 818-985-5735. But first, we're going to take some time and remind you all why it's so important to keep public radio alive, keep this station alive by bringing you some dynamic news, information, and analysis. Today, we are taking on the urgent issue of human trafficking. At its core, human trafficking means using force, fraud, or coercion to exploit people. It's not just a global problem, a problem that you hear about in other countries, or sometimes we like to think this is a problem in underdeveloped countries. It is one that affects us all here. In fact, in California, in LA County, maybe even in your neighborhood. Our state, the great state of California, has some of the highest rates in the nation. Yet the data is often fragmented or underreported. Much of labor trafficking in particular remains hidden, affecting immigrant communities, immigrant workers, farm workers, domestic workers, and yes, day laborers. And this, of course, it's more important today, given the political climate that we're navigating and given the current administration. Survivors often face barriers that make speaking out or seeking help almost impossible, from immigration status issues to language barriers to fear of retaliation and a genuine deep distrust of the institutions that govern not only at the local level but at the state and federal level. Until recently, California law did not even designate a clear agency to investigate labor trafficking, leaving many cases to slip through the cracks and, as such, that many more people impacted. That is why today we're covering this topic and also where the Sunita Jain Anti-Trafficking Initiative comes in. Founded in 2021, so it's a relatively young organization. Founded at the Loyola Law School, local here in Southern California. The initiative is focused on building survivor-informed and trauma-informed policies. Now, that's very important, survivor-informed and trauma-informed policies. It promotes a non-carceral approach to this issue, supports systemic change, and works to elevate survivor leadership. One of its major policies very recently, in fact, this year, is AB 1362, introduced by Assemblymember Ash Kalra, who we actually did engage his office and was unavailable to join us. But the Assemblymember authored a bill known as the Human Trafficking Prevention and Protection Act for temporary immigrant workers, which is one of the topics that we're going to include in today's episode. In fact, the entire episode is being dedicated to this topic. The bill expands protections for workers recruited abroad, closes loopholes that have allowed abusive recruiters to operate without oversight, and strengthens enforcement tools to prevent labor trafficking in California. So to help us get this issue topic grounded, my first guest is Professor Stephanie Richard, Director of the Sunita Jain Anti-Trafficking Initiative at Loyola Law School. She has dedicated her career to advancing survivor-centered policies and shaping legislation to expose and end labor trafficking in California. Professor Richard, welcome to the show. Professor, are you there with us?
I'm here.
There you go. It's okay. How you doing, Professor Richard?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So as I was
There's
saying,
an echo, though.
do you have a radio turned on? Maybe turn down your radio if you have a radio on.
No, I don't have anything. I just wanted to make sure you're not hearing it. So.
No, we're good. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Well, welcome to The Signal. And as I was saying in the introduction, this issue of human trafficking, labor trafficking, is something that unfortunately impacts the state of California at significant levels. Can you give us a clearer picture of what labor trafficking looks like in California today, and how does it differ from other forms of exploitation?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that important question. As a practitioner, when I think about labor trafficking, I think about the domestic worker who has had their pay stolen from them, and they've been threatened with deportation. I also think of the survivor who comes with hope for a new job and then is isolated and threatened. So labor trafficking is really the exploitation of someone's work or services through force, fraud, or coercion. And while we often, I think the general public imagines physical violence or restraint in trafficking situations, traffickers most commonly use psychological tactics, so threats of deportation, harm to loved ones, or even false promises about immigration status. And this is what traps people into exploitive work conditions. And when I train on the issue of labor trafficking versus what is labor exploitation, what I commonly tell people is, if you are a labor trafficking victim, there's a third party, your employer, who, the manager, the company itself, who is making you believe that if you leave, something bad will happen to you.
Right.
Whereas if you're in an exploitive work condition, it's still illegal, but what it is that you're not being paid, there might be abusive working conditions, but it's that your own circumstance make you believe that you can't work somewhere else. And so that is what really distinguishes labor trafficking from other forms of exploitation.
So it sounds like what you're describing, Professor, is precisely what creates a system where survivors remain invisible. What are the biggest barriers to keeping people from being identified or supported?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in California, first off, I have to say we really lack comprehensive data on labor trafficking, and that's why at the Sunita Jain Anti-Trafficking Initiative at Loyola Law School, we've been advocating for a prevalence study both in Los Angeles and statewide, because if we don't know what trafficking looks like in California, we can't properly address it. What we do know is that California consistently ranks the highest in the calls from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and that means trafficking is happening in our own neighborhoods, and we're simply not doing enough to stop it. And then when I think about what makes survivors remain invisible, right, there are three major barriers. The first is the public's misconception. So I think a lot of times the public thinks that trafficking only involves sex trafficking or only involves children, where in reality, labor trafficking impacts men, women, children, and transgender individuals, citizens and non-citizens alike. In my own personal work, I've worked on cases of agriculture, hospitality, elder care, construction, and even skilled professions like nursing and teaching.
Wow.
Further, and this is even where things are less identified, a lot of trafficking victims are actually forced to commit crimes by their traffickers. This is actually called labor trafficking for forced criminality, and they're actually forced to steal or sell or carry drugs, and then these victims are still arrested for their own victimization. So, again, we have a long way to go to understand the complex dynamics of trafficking. And that feeds into my second major barrier, which is looking at what psychological coercion really looks like for trafficking survivors. So to the general public, a victim could appear almost free. They might have phones or cars or even their own apartment. But you have to remember that trafficking is about the fear and manipulation that keeps them working for their trafficker. And when I train on this topic, I tell people, under California and federal law, you cannot legally consent to your own exploitation or trafficking.
Of course, yeah.
Yet many victims, right, believe they've somehow consented to this, and so that makes identification even harder. And then the last thing I just have to highlight is that we have really focused on a law enforcement-centered response to human trafficking, which makes sense when you think of it as a particularly serious crime. But with most of our resources going to law enforcement, we miss a lot of victims because victims fear the police sometimes more than their traffickers, right, you know, based on what they've been told by their traffickers or their own experience with the police. So I believe survivors remain invisible because we haven't shifted our first response strategy toward community-based outreach, such as peer advocates, medical professionals, civil agencies, people who look like the community and the people who are being trafficked, people survivors can trust. And until California invests in this shift, I think we're really not going to identify the survivors of this crime, and they will remain invisible.
Professor, so clearly, as you're sharing with us, this is a serious problem that impacts multiple industries. I mean, this is not just, as you pointed out, sex trafficking and some of the other industries that we have this perception that, well, it's only this particular group, and then on that level, it might even be a group that sometimes is frowned upon or what have you. Why hasn't the state done more to better understand this issue, giving the proximity to the issue of immigration, among other things? Why haven't? And I know that we want to talk about this bill that you all are a part of, but before we get into the bill AB 1362, which begins to address some of the issues, why haven't our academic community, why haven't our elected officials in the past done more to address this issue?
So I think we all have a gut response when we hear human trafficking, and we want to have an easy solution to prevent it. But there are no easy solutions to preventing trafficking and protecting survivors. What we need are these very granular, measured approaches that look at where do we stop trafficking right before it starts, whether it be in our child welfare system, in our business supply chains, in our own communities, because we need these individual, not one-size-fits-all solutions. And as I said, we haven't even invested the resources we need into the data to have a better understanding of what trafficking looks like in our state, and there's no national data that shows that either. So even though this is something we've started to hear about for the last 20 years, I still feel like we're kind of at ground zero because most of the responses have been reactionary and, as I said, take a carceral approach, and we're never going to arrest our way out of this problem.
Just like we didn't arrest our way out of the absolutely failed policy that is the war on drugs. You know, you mentioned earlier this issue, you referenced wage theft, and, you know, LA County is the wage theft capital of the nation, and I'm sure that plays heavily into this topic. So tell us about AB 1362. Assemblymember Ash Kalra has we see this as a critical step forward. What does the bill actually do, and how does it close some of the loopholes in current law?
Yeah, so thank you for asking me about this critical piece of legislation. It's currently on Governor Newsom's desk, and we are asking for him to sign it. And this is one of those careful approaches that I talked about that really looks at preventing trafficking before it starts. And it's rooted, for me as a practitioner, in the actual experiences of the survivors who I've served who came legally to the United States on temporary work visas, only to be exploited by the fraudulent recruiters who charged them thousands of dollars and lied about the jobs they were promised. And my own experience is also shown through national data-driven efforts that found a very specific vulnerability: fraudulent recruitment of temporary work visa holders. And so what's a temporary visa? Temporary work visa. It's a visa that lets you legally come to work in California for a short period of time, and you're bound to one employer. And again, it covers everything from skilled work to unskilled work. And back in 2010, national data actually showed that 2/3 of foreign national trafficking survivors receiving services from the largest service providers in the country actually had entered the U.S. legally on temporary visas. And that the problem started in their home country, where these fraudulent third-party recruiters, who, by the way, are already paid by employers, right, to recruit the workers, charge workers exorbitant fees. So I've had cases of $2,000, $5,000, up to $25,000. And then these same workers are lied to about the visa terms. For example, they're promised a green card when this is a 6 or 9 month visa.
Wow.
So that's kind of that's the framework that AB 1362 is designed to address. And I do want to say that it is first of its kind legislation in the country that we have failed to pass federally. And so California can really be a leader in this because we get 1/5 of all the temporary workers who come into the United States. And AB 1362 requires recruiters to register with California, post a bond, and accept legal accountability, which means accepting service of process, so they can't just disappear after exploiting people.
Right.
It mandates that recruiters provide contracts in the worker's native language, but the contract has to clearly outline the terms of the job, but also about the visa, right, and the details. And it also must clearly say that workers cannot be charged recruitment fees. Again, these are already paid by the employers that are recruiting them, so that any worker who is coming to California should know, or at least have access to information about what is legitimate work. And then the last two provisions of AB 1362 that are really important are its teeth. So the first is that it gives workers and the labor commissioner in California the right to sue any recruiter who violates those rules and provisions that we just talked about above. Mm-hmm. And then for employers who use the labor recruiters, if they don't use a registered recruiter, so someone legitimate, they can be held liable if they use one of the fraudulent foreign labor recruiters in the same way the recruiter can. So that is kind of what AB 1362 does at its heart. We did take amendments last month to AB 1362. So now it covers, as a start, H-2A agricultural workers.
Sure.
So that's about 40,000 to 50,000 people who come to California on these temporary work visas annually. And it's a really good start. The other thing that AB 1362 now does is it requires a study to expand the protections to all categories of temporary work visa holders coming to California. And that annually now is about 350,000.
Wow. So, beyond the legislation, there is this human cost of trafficking. And maybe take advantage of this opportunity to bring in our next guest, Jayson De Guzman. Jayson was born and raised in the Philippines, where he worked in construction before being recruited to the United States under false promises, exactly what Professor Richard was just telling us about. He believed he was coming here legitimately, but instead he was coerced into labor trafficking. His passport was taken. He was told he owed $12,000 once he was here, and he was forced to work around the clock in elder care and construction, and for only $400 a month. He was isolated, threatened, and stripped of his freedoms here in this very country of ours. After 9 months, a neighbor's report led to an FBI investigation, and Jayson was eventually rescued. With support from CAST, the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, a Los Angeles-based nonprofit that helps folks with these types of issues, including housing, counseling, and advocacy, he began to rebuild his life. Today, he shares his story to raise awareness about labor trafficking, exposing the deceptive practices of this recruitment system. Jayson, welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jayson. Thank you for your willingness to share your story. Jayson, can you start off by giving us some idea, what were you told back in the Philippines about the opportunity in coming to the U.S. and why it seemed like something you could trust at the time?
Yes. I was working in the Philippines before as a construction worker, and then I knew that I knew the person before that who recruited me. I thought that he was a nice person. And then he called me in the Philippines to get if I want to work in the United States, and seems like I could trust her, and then I just say yes because being in the Philippines, it's hard life. You just kind of excited when I hear you want to come to the United States for kind of free, and then she said she's gonna do all the paperwork for me.
I see. And Jayson, once you arrived, when did you realize something was wrong? At what point did you say, wait a minute, this is not a good situation here?
Yeah, in the first day that I arrived, it's just like when she picked me up in the airport, and then as soon as I get in the facility, she asked my passport. Like, I'm gonna get I have your passport, I will take care of it. So it's the same time. So of course, it's the first time here. I still, okay, it's my passport. Since I trusted her, and then beginning of that, and then she introduced me in the facility. This is where you're gonna work, and then this is how we began working at the facility. Like, okay, since like first week seems to be okay, and then day by day, then it seems like you're getting tired of it. Like you realize you never take a day off.
Wow.
And then it comes like adding more and more and more in work, like every single day.
Right.
Like,
and at any point did you consider, what, I need to get out of here, I need to escape, and if so, why didn't you?
Yeah, okay, that's a point that, yes, of course, there's a point that I want to get out, I need to get out.
Sure.
But she's threatening. She's threatened me before that. Like, because since I don't have a passport anymore, and then like I think about getting out, and then she was threatening me before. If you go out, that the police might arrested you. You don't have any paper. And then she was telling me that I'm gonna be only working for her because I'm the one who brought you here. So you belong to me. And on top of that, you owe me $12,000. She told me that I have to pay her and I have to work for her in 12. And then after that, it seems like I don't have a choice because I have to pay my debt. I have to stay there and then work and work and work. And then seems like you're doing everything in that work. Like when you have a chance, do this. When you have a chance, do this. You're doing construction job. You're doing housekeeping, taking care of the older people. Everything, doing laundry, cooking for them, and then sometimes you don't even have time to sleep. And then sometimes when you saw you sleeping, she was getting mad because she said you're not allowed to sleep here on the couch or live because if the licensing see you here, what can you say? Who's gonna watch my client? Who's watching my client?
Right.
And then, like my coworker, sometimes me and Angela, sometimes, hey, boss, Jayson didn't sleep at all last night because the other client is been awake all day, so she had to look after him. And then she said, you have to find a way how to put him to sleep, and then how are you gonna go sleep if nobody taking care of these people? And then there's one day, sometimes I sleep in the couch or sometimes sleep in the folding bed. And then there's a day, one day she saw me pulling my folding bed, sleep. And then she get mad again because she said, you are not allowed to sleep in that bed because if they see you again or licensing or the houseman or the inspector come here, I'm gonna tell them that you're not leaving this house. So you have to find a way how to get it out in that situation.
Wow.
And then I ending up sleeping on the floor every night, or sometimes no sleep. Ending up sleeping on the floor right next to my client, to my patient.
Right.
And this.
Go ahead. Finish your thought, Jayson.
Yeah, and then yes, you always be alert when you hear noise. You just pull your blanket and put them away, so that way nobody see it.
Right. Let me reintroduce you both. On the line with us is Professor Stephanie Richard, Director of the Sunita Jain Anti-Trafficking Initiative at Loyola Law School, and Jayson De Guzman, who is was born and raised in the Philippines and who came under false pretense for work here through a recruiter and was subsequently forced into labor exploitation and trafficking. And Professor, let me come back to you for a second here. As I hear, Jayson describe this situation, just how common are these type of tactics? I know we touched on it earlier, but having navigated this topic, having represented and worked with other workers, this fear and intimidation tactic, how prevalent is this? And is this precisely what we're hoping AB 1362 is going to address?
Yes. So you heard Jayson talk about how he was told that he had to pay $12,000 for the fee for his legal visa. He also didn't know the terms and conditions of his visa or the work, and his trafficker was able to tell him that he had to work for 12 years.
12, wait a minute, 12 years.
Yeah.
That was the...
And so
wow.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, just it caught me by surprise. Wow.
Yeah, to pay back the debt. And these are common things that I've heard representing hundreds of trafficking survivors through my career. So these are the exact things that AB 1362 we hope will prevent. Because again, workers who come to California on temporary work visas will know that they have a right to a contract in their own language with the terms and conditions of the visa, as well as the fact that they will know that they do not absolutely have to pay a fee, that employer at the elder care facility was supposed to pay the fee for Jayson to come on the lawful visa. And our hope is that then workers, if they're in exploitive situations when they get here, will know that they can turn to for help because what is happening is wrong.
Right.
And, Jayson stayed in his experience for 9 months. Angela, another trafficking survivor, trafficked with him, was there for 2 years. And I've served clients who have been with traffickers who have come on lawful visas for 10 or 20 years because they simply don't know their rights. And this is the type of tactics that traffickers use and manipulate. You owe me a debt, right? You owe me your labor. I'll call the police and have you deported or put in jail, right? Unless you keep working for me.
Jayson, let me come back to you. So I understand that at one point it was a neighbor, actually, who took notice of what was going on, and it was a report, a neighbor's report led to an FBI investigation that subsequently led to your rescue. What exactly happened there? How did, tell us more about what led up to you being rescued out of this situation.
So there was a neighbor there. I think he's kind of seems to know what's going on. He kind of suspicious there's something wrong in that facility. Mm-hmm. And then that's why he ended up reporting to the authority or FBI. Because the happiness, he always sees us every day, or he don't even see us going out. So sometimes sometimes we just wave him in like backyard neighborhood. Like seems like probably he seems wrong because he sees us every day, never leaving the house.
Right.
And then he's seen us like we work there every single day, like 7 days a week. That's why probably we got good neighborhood, kind of have suspicious. So
And
we're so glad to report what's going on.
Wonderful. And Jayson, tell us now, today you are now an advocate. You become an advocate to help prevent this type of nefarious activity. You've rebuilt your life. Tell us about what you're doing today to help address these issues.
So, I'm sorry, say it again?
Yeah, so tell us what you're doing today to help combat this issue. What are you doing to help others?
So, like I said, being human trafficking, it's so hard situation. Sometimes you just want to give up. I mean, if I can help them, I would. But if my voice can hear out and hear what's going on and hear my story to share, maybe we could help. And
sure.
For other people.
Sure. And Professor Richards, as we close out this segment, I understand the bill is at the governor's desk. What is it that you want to let our audience know about this final process, getting it across the finish line so that we can help address this issue further?
Yeah, so AB 1362, which deals with fraudulent foreign labor recruiters, in preventing trafficking at the point before it starts, at the point of recruitment. And it's just one of many steps that we need to take to stop trafficking from happening in our own backyards. And we just hope that you, as the listening audience, will let Governor Newsom know to please protect workers from trafficking and sign AB 1362. You can go to his website and you can put an email to him with that request today. Thank you so much.
My guest has been Professor Stephanie Richard, Director of the Sunita Jain Anti-Trafficking Initiative at Loyola Law School, and Jayson De Guzman, a survivor of human trafficking, labor trafficking, exploitation. I want to thank you both for joining us. Stay with us as we come back. We're going to talk to L.A. County, the County of Los Angeles, and senior official at L.A. County who's going to tell us about what the County of L.A. is doing to address and mitigate some of these challenges. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Governments lie. I mean, not just the American government. Governments in general lie.
Ay Dios, ¿qué es lo que le pasa al jefe en comando? Señor, ¿será que su cerebro no está funcionando? ¿Será que no quiere pensar en lo que pudiera pasar si la mayoría en la nación empieza a gritar revolución? Señor presidente, lo que traes en la mente es muy diferente de lo que piensa tu gente. ¿Quiénes son tu gente, señor presidente?
Welcome back to the Signal News, Information, and Analysis. I'm your host, Armando Gudiño, Dino, around these parts. And yeah, we just finished this conversation with Professor Stephanie Richard from the Sunita Jain Trafficking Initiative and a victim, Jayson, who came under false pretense for work and ended up in a horrible situation where his life was literally controlled down to where he could sleep or not sleep. And, this is an ongoing issue. Now, human trafficking remains one of the most hidden crises here in Los Angeles County. Workers can be coerced into these exploitative labor situations. Individuals are forced into commercial sex work. Survivors often live in silence out of fear, having experienced this. To address part of this, we now bring Los Angeles County Representative and Deputy Director of the Office of Labor Equity, Rose Basmidzian. I hope I said that right, Rose. Within LA County.
Good afternoon.
Great. I'll try again shortly. With Los Angeles County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, she leads a team that works on these very issues of enforcement, education, prevention programs that aim to protect workers and create accountability. Rose is going to help us understand a little bit about these programs, why it matters, and more importantly, what is LA County doing to address this. Rose, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me to speak about this important issue. I think you said it really well. How do we prevent this?
Right. So, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to our previous guest, It's a horrible situation.
I did.
I mean,
It is.
It caught me by surprise to hear things like, in the case of Jayson, he was put into the situation where he now owed this trafficker 12 years of his life and 12 years of worth of income. So let's kind of put it in context, right? What kinds of businesses? Sure. Let me back up, right? L.A. County passed an ordinance, I believe it was in 2021, requiring businesses to post resources, provide employee training. That was an important first step. How big of a problem? We took notice that there is a information gap, a statistics gap. But how big of a problem that you all are aware at LA County is in fact this? How big of a problem is this here at home?
I think labor, and I want to really highlight the labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking, because oftentimes when we think about trafficking, we think about sex trafficking, but labor trafficking exists in LA County as well. Traffickers use force, fear, and coercion in both labor and sex exploitation. And, the victims could look like any of us, but generally they're minors, immigrants, or people with socioeconomic vulnerabilities. And I think the recent fires are examples of how natural disasters can also contribute and make a person vulnerable and a target for these traffickers.
Tell us more.
So in short, the problem is large, it's broad, and involves many victims, right? And I think one of the things that I took away from Jayson as well is that his neighbor reported it.
Yes,
and I think it's important. It's important. I think the initiative from the Board of Supervisors to adopt this ordinance goes to that issue. How do we prevent it? How do we educate our patrons, the public, our workers to recognize those signs and to be able to report it? So it's important to adopt these laws, right?
I noticed, Rose, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I noticed, Professor Richard made reference to the various entities, the various parties that ultimately are responsible for this. In particular, is the employer who is aware oftentimes that this is happening. They're taking advantage and as such are part of the exploitation that is going on. So in this case with LA County wanting to inform and educate not only workers and other individuals, but the businesses, what kinds of businesses are required to comply with these, with this education, with this outreach?
So the Prevention of Human Trafficking Ordinance that was adopted by the County of Los Angeles requires 25 different industries to comply with this ordinance. And I can give you a few of them, but all those industries are listed in the ordinance, and it's on our website at workers.lacounty.gov. But some of them are primary airports, bus stations, urgent care centers, truck stops, hotels and motels, restaurants, gas stations, massage establishments. Those are some of the industries that are required to abide by this ordinance, which requires a clear posting in visible places near public entrances of where people can get help. In addition to that, it requires the employers to provide their workforce with 20-minute training of how to recognize the signs of human trafficking and how to report them. So I think this is a really important ordinance to prevent and be proactive about this issue. This ordinance is a key initiative by LA County to fight trafficking, and it establishes clear requirements for businesses to participate in prevention efforts and comply with the law. In addition to that, it supports enforcement and establishes penalties for those who fail to comply with it.
Yeah, what does happen if a business says, you know what, I'm just going to maybe not put the poster up, or, what are the enforcement mechanisms in place to address this?
Sure. If the employer fails to have the poster, which during our investigation on various workplace violations, we also check for these posters. If we don't see them, then we will issue a notice of violation. We'll allow the employer to correct it within 30 days. If they don't, then they will be subject to an administrative fine of up to $1,000 per day per violation. But it also carries civil penalties of up to $2,500 per day and can be charged as a misdemeanor that's punishable by a fine or jail time. In addition to that, it prohibits using any building or place in unincorporated areas of LA County for trafficking. So there's an opportunity for the county to declare it a public nuisance. So it carries and establishes these remedies for somebody who's not complying, and to ensure that, we're supporting the enforcement of it. Right. Because the intent of it is to prevent and to educate our workforce, not only the workforce. I mean, the poster is supposed to be in a place where the patrons could also see it.
Sure.
And if they see somebody's being exploited, they have an opportunity to report that.
Actually, so I'm curious. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's equally important, right, to have the employer be aware and know the signs, the employee, of course, to understand that, hey, this might apply to me, and the audience, or in this case, the patrons who arrive at these locations. What are some of the signs of trafficking that an employee or somebody should be able to recognize?
Sure. Generally, it's physical and behavioral signs are the most important signs for employees to be trained on, for the public to be trained on, and also the public and the patrons to be trained on. But in addition, some of the red flags that are associated with exploitation and trafficking are when somebody is being monitored while they are speaking to others, or not being paid what the worker was promised, or the worker is being threatened with deportation. Other signs include documentation such as passports or IDs that are being taken away from the worker, or working in dangerous conditions without proper gear, trainings, breaks, or protection, or not having control over their income, or if they are afraid to talk about the work that they do. These are all signs and should be reported. Looking at somebody's behavior and how they are treated, looking at, if they're speaking with someone, do they fear that their boss is watching them? Is it constant? Things like that are important. And, as patrons, and I can speak for myself too, when I go to restaurants, when I go to some of these businesses, I look for signs like that to make sure that, workers are being treated properly. And if we see it, we need to report it. And that's the whole intent of this ordinance.
Let me reintroduce you, Rose. On the line with me is Rose Basmadzian, Deputy Director of the Office of Labor Equity within the Los Angeles County Department of Consumer Affairs. We're talking about LA County's efforts to curb the issue of human trafficking, labor trafficking, a topic of today's show. And what about the challenges, Rose? We have, the second largest Cambodian community outside of Cambodia, second largest Mexican city in the world. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And this is a monumental task in a county of more than 10 million people. How does the program address the needs of non-English speaking communities? Is the material in additional languages?
Yes, we have the poster in English and Spanish. We provide education outreach via multiple languages. We're contracting with community-based organizations to be able to provide outreach and education to folks from different communities in different languages. We utilize hyperlocal media to ensure that the information is available to different communities, because we know, and Jayson's story was very important to hear, that it happens to every community, and we want to be able to educate them that there are remedies, there are protections that are out there for you, and how do you get to those resources?
And Rose, what perhaps one of the more important questions that keeps coming to mind for me right now about this topic is the challenges associated with the political climate. We know from talking to the professor and Jayson and our own research here, my producer Nella brought me a whole mountain of research on this topic. And the political climate is such that this type of exploitation, which happens in the immigrant community perhaps more than others, folks are afraid. They're afraid to come forward. They're afraid that, maybe, this threat of deportation. How is LA County trying to mitigate that fact?
Someone's immigration status is not relevant to us. And anyone can file a complaint. We don't ask if the worker has worked there, and we can put them there and there's violations, not just the prevention of human trafficking violation, the ordinance violation, but any worker violation, workplace violation, we will address it. That is a challenge for us. We want to make sure that we create the safe space for them to come forward to us, because we don't, and a lot of people, yes, you're right, because of the climate, a lot of people are not coming forward and speaking to government agents, but immigration status is not relevant to us. We want to assist workers. We want to get them whatever remedies that are available for them.
So, Rose, just to close us out one more time, where can the audience or where can workers who may be listening go to get the help they need if, in fact, they find themselves, or if, in the case of an audience member, they suspect that maybe there's worth an inquiry into the situation of a worker? Where do they find out more information?
Our website has a lot of information in multiple languages, and that's at workers.lacounty.gov. Or anyone can contact us, and if they want to report it anonymously, they're more than welcome to do that as well. At 800, give me 1 second, let me pull our number.
It's okay.
1-800-593-8222.
My guest, wonderful. Thank you, Rose. My guest has been Rose Basmadzian, Deputy Director of the Office of Labor Equity within Los Angeles County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. She leads a team that works on enforcement, education, and prevention programs to help address issues of human trafficking and labor exploitation. Stay with us. I want to thank all my guests on this topic today. It's been a delicate topic, but one that we have to address and continue to address as it moves forward.